Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Everyday is Saturday. I'm Matt Stahl. I'm my partner, Brad Gatto here. And we have one of our favorite types of episodes in store today where we are actually interviewing somebody that we believe is leading an Everyday is Saturday lifestyle.
Yeah, actually, and we'll introduce them in just a second. But I got to hear their story a couple, 3-4 months ago. And immediately when I heard their story, I was like, can you be on our podcast?
We always get really excited.
A little aggressive
when
maybe.
we find the stories. Grab them right away because you don't get them every day.
You don't, but we have the opportunity to talk to a lot of really cool people, and luckily enough, some of them oblige and are willing to join us on the podcast.
Yeah. Before we jump in, what have you been up to?
Work. It's end of the year for us here at Fiat, and end of the year with as much tax planning as we do is just super busy with trying to make decisions on things like Roth conversions and tax loss harvesting, and any kind of in the market obviously caused a little bit of riff for us this year. Yep. So a lot of movement and things like that. So just very busy with work, and my boys have now gotten completely into their basketball tournament schedule. And so we were lucky enough to have both of them have tournaments this weekend. One of them was in Northfield, which if you're unfamiliar is about an hour 15 south of my house. And the other one was in Becker, Minnesota, which is about an hour north of my house. So put some miles on the vehicles this weekend. Yeah, quite the tour. You?
Love it. I'm working, but it's in a much different capacity than you are. So I'm working on some exciting things that we have coming up for some advisor retreats at the end of the year. And so I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited to participate in it.
Yes.
I get to actually sit back and be a participant and not have to. Yeah.
It's going to be fun.
It is. Yeah. Well, it's going to be weird.
Going to be weird
because the average advisor is very type A. That's the type of person that kind of tends to be attracted to sales, because there's some sales to being an advisor, but then also just kind of the numbers, the drivers.
Yep.
And we, because I'm in that camp, so I'm one of them, are not good at reflection, stepping back, taking time, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to force it on them this week through our end of year advisor retreat for a day and a half, which you were leading. So it should be fun.
We're going to break those hard candy shells one day. Yeah. Other than that, personally, we ventured into the new sport of futsal.
What?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I legitimately don't know what that is.
Picture soccer on a gym floor with a different ball that doesn't bounce. It's really interesting.
What?
Yeah. Different. But it's been fun. So that's our world.
There you go. Well, let's jump into this. So I'm going to introduce our guest here, and then we'll kind of get rocking on his story. So I just met our guest. I'm going to say, and he may correct me on this, but I don't know, 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago. He doesn't even live in the state in which we live, and we're still going to oblige and let him be on. And we'll get to that in a second. But again, just had a wonderful opportunity, had a great visit with him. And in part of that visit, got a little glimpse into his story. And I'm just really excited for him to share, because not everybody gets to lead a very purposeful life where your values guide your decisions and not your money kind of guiding your decisions. And so with that said, Mr. Kelly Wolf, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Where are you joining us from, Kelly? Where do you live?
Okay, right now it's from my home in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just north, Swamico. And yeah.
Green Bay, are you born and raised Wisconsin?
No, I actually grew up in the central part of the state near Wausau. And so right in the middle of State Highway 29 on the way to Minneapolis. Grew up in Dairy Farm. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's my heritage. Yes.
For those of you that are not tuning in the video, he has his Packers certificate right next to right in the picture.
Yeah. So a dairy farm. So did your parents retire dairy farmers? Was that their life?
No, it's like, the typical dairy farm story. My grandfather had the dairy farm. My dad had milk routes, and then we worked the farm and plus all to the dairy. My grandfather retired on the dairy farm. Then they sold out. My dad kept the milk routes and sold those as well. The small dairy farm just isn't the future anymore, and that couldn't continue. So I grew up with, 6 or 5 other siblings. When it came time for me coming out of high school, it was like, you've got to find a job. There's not enough to keep you going here. So that's how I left the dairy farm.
I have a $1 million question here. Do you drink milk, and do you enjoy it?
I drink milk occasionally.
Okay.
I do enjoy it. Yes.
My wife had a dairy farm in her family, which led her to not enjoy milk after seeing the whole operation.
Well, right. Exactly. I've been going.
Don't ruin it for everybody else. Very people listening that didn't grow up in Wisconsin. It sounds like you have the stereotypical Wisconsin story. You know, in Wisconsin, grew up in a dairy farm, Packers fan. You like cheese?
Yeah, that's gonna be the next thing.
Of course I like cheese. And I like it even not on my head. Yes.
That's great. So that said, the part of your story where I would love to kind of pick up is you had by all rights, a very successful career, but just tell us what you did and then kind of lead us into your retirement, quote unquote, story with the twist.
Okay, sure. So I'll give you the Cliff's Notes. Grew up in the dairy farm, didn't have anything to support me going forward, had to find work back in the mid 70s when there were no jobs. This is the inflationary period that we're dealing with now that we compare to back then. Only difference was unemployment was about 14%. So I had to find a job. Lucky enough to finally net a job with a paper mill in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and started out hourly labor. Worked my way along with that. 10 years as an hourly team member. We built a new facility in Savannah, Georgia. They asked me to go as a supervisor to that job. So I took the job, went there. From there, grew department manager in Oklahoma, then transferred around the country, Oregon, Wisconsin, where else was I besides Oklahoma? And then ended up South Carolina and in a corporate office job in Atlanta. Got my college degree nights and weekends when I was in Oklahoma. And I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. You miss all the fun part of college. And then ended up senior vice president in charge of 12 pulp and paper mills in the U.S.
Wow. That's the American dream right there. That is
right.
Stuff. And
yeah, part of it's being in the right place at the right time and having good mentors and those types of things. Really lucky to have the opportunity. But then when I came to the corporate job, my role was to reduce the cost structure that we had. And I was to look at a virtual plant and how it was put together and how we could compete with the new upstarts that were taking our business. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to see the CEO and he asked the question, these guys aren't making much money, are they? They're out there just gouging to be able to take our market share. And I had to tell them, I said, no, not only are they making money, they're making a lot of money. And so that was my role, right? Then reduce costs. And we did it. We did a really good job. But then I got asked to do something I didn't feel comfortable with. And that was to further reduce costs, to be competitive, to cut pay and benefits of our hourly members. And at the time, there was nobody in corporate headquarters taking a cut in pay. So I just didn't feel right with that. I was at the twilight of my career and said, this is the sign. It's time to do something. Yeah. So I retired back to Green Bay, built this home that we're in right now. And my wife and I just really enjoyed that. My kids are on the West Coast, so it allowed us to travel and really enjoyed it.
So what year was it that you retired and how old were you when you retired?
I retired in 2015 and I was just turning 60.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then that was the move up to Wisconsin, or not up to Wisconsin, you were in Wisconsin, but up to Green Bay at that point in time. And you guys built a house and you've got how many kids?
We have two. And then 3 grandkids, one in Southern California and one in Seattle. 2 granddaughters there, a grandson in Southern Cal.
Yeah. Awesome. Nice. And so you retired in 2015, you built the house. Then what?
Started a consulting company, did a little bit of work here and there, management leadership kind of thing. It wasn't quite 2 years later. I got a phone message, an email message, a LinkedIn message, and a phone call, all with about 5 minutes of each other from a recruiter looking for somebody to work in the paper industry again. And so they talked a little bit about it. And I said, I am really happy retired. I am not, I have no intention of going back to work. And then they mentioned the name of the company. And it happened to be the company that we did the study on that was making all the money. So I knew everything about them, and I got somewhat interested. And I told them, if it's this company, potentially I have an interest. So we went back and forth, worked out the details, and lo and behold, I went to work for them.
So retire, build your house, you're retirement home, start to do some traveling, which we'll come back to in just a second. So what was the time frame between 2015 and you actually going back to work? How long were you quote unquote retired?
I was retired for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say I was bored. I was enjoying life. Mm-hmm.
What did you do for those 2 years?
Oh gosh, I'm a snowmobiler, a motorcycle, ATVs, travel. I like to do a lot of things, plus active outside. I used to be a runner, now I'm a walker. As you get older, your joints don't let you do that anymore. So, and travel probably was the biggest one. Mm-hmm.
Was there a trip that stands out travel-wise in those 2 years?
Oh gosh, I think the favorite trip we've ever taken has been a Eastern European river cruise, and we went up the Danube, and that was wonderful. Yeah. We have a couple that we travel with. Really enjoy doing that.
That's great.
Love it.
So 2 years, and then you get this recruiting barrage, we'll call it, because they paint you multiple different ways. And by happenstance, it happens to be the company that you did this study on earlier to try to figure out how they were doing basically so well, relatively speaking. And so how long was that recruitment process? And what ultimately, other than the fact that they had some success that you had studied, kind of put you back into the workforce?
Okay. Part of it is they were struggling with the plant that they had in South Carolina. And I remember telling my wife, I like to turn around. So that's what I like to do. And I said, I've got one more of those left in me. And she wasn't 100% sure whether or not we should do it. And after a little bit of time, it just made a lot of sense for us to go do it. So that's as simple as it is, knowing this company and the growth, and growing by leaps and bounds, fastest growing paper tissue company in North America.
Interesting.
How do you decide when that turnaround is quote unquote done?
That's the hard part, right? If you can give me a good answer on that. So I went in as this plant manager job. Within 3 months, I was in charge of their manufacturing operation, and now I'm basically CEO and run the company for the owners. And it's a $1.5 billion sales company. So it's a good sized company, and it's really a fun job. So now it really is. I've been able to semi-retire. For the most part, I don't work Fridays, and I don't work that many hours in a day. I do travel quite a bit, though. I travel to facilities and or corporate headquarters. So it is time for me to take the next step, and I plan to do that right after the first of the year. Not completely retire, but another step away.
Yeah. Was there anything in 2015, the first time you quote unquote retired, that was scary to you, stepping into that not working anymore world, especially, and I'm going to say this and maybe it's not true, I'm kind of painting with a broad brush here. When you grow up in the Midwest, like you did, and you grow up on a dairy farm like you did, the work ethic there is, I would say, second to none, right? Like, especially like a dairy farmer. If you've never been on a dairy farm, there's not a day off. Like, you don't go on vacation. It's a requirement that you're there every single day. And so with that in your background, and I think it's scary for everybody, was there anything about that process of stepping away that was frightening?
Well, the thing is, going back into the workforce like that it's like dairy farming again. When you're in that kind of a role, you don't punch the clock and stop. I mean, it's there. You strap it on. You wear. Yeah. I remember a fighter pilot one time talking about what it was like to be a fighter pilot. Somebody asked, "What is it like crawling into that airplane?" He said, I don't get in the airplane. He said, I strap it on me. And very true. When you go look at any kind of a work business, I'm sure you fellas know that as well, right? You own it. It's 24/7. And that's the scary part. Stepping back in, saying, I'm all in.
Yeah. So, but when you were stepping out the first time, was there anything that frightened you about not having a paycheck anymore and this kind of new phase of life you were stepping into?
I would tell you yes. Financial planning, thinking about, do I have enough to live forever? And how do I do the things I want to do? Am I going to be able to do those things? Am I going to be able to help my children? Am I going to be able to leave a legacy? I grew up, like the old saying, dirt poor, and I never wanted to be that again. So that was always a driver for me as I was growing up and going through all these other, phases of my career. was ensuring that, I had enough money to live. And I want to make sure my kids don't have to go through that as well. I never want them to have to feel that way. So yeah, that was the scary part.
Yeah. Have you had those conversations with your kids about your decision process?
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. And frequently, and it's interesting to watch the generational change. And because they didn't grow up that way, they don't feel or have that major concern as well. And in fact, my oldest son said to me, which is the one I think I told you, Brad, that's the one that has me concerned now, is about a year and a half ago, he said, Dad, how much longer do you plan to work? And I said, I don't know. I said, as long as it's still fun. He said, oh. And he goes, okay. He says, but we'd rather spend more time with you than have more money when you die.
Yeah, that sinks in, huh? Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. That sinks in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with your, you kind of got to practice retirement almost.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite parts of your stories. You got to play the retirement game for a couple of years and then go back. And now, for all intents and purposes, you're going to phase yourself back in starting next year. Not fully, but what advice would you give to people for somebody that kind of got to practice it for a couple of years that are in that situation where they're nearing retirement, thinking about it, that you think is beneficial if you could go back and do it again or something to that effect?
Sure. I think the main thing I would tell people is don't be afraid of it. Do your homework. And it's not that hard to do it. And the other part is, it's like when you started out and you bought your first home and that house payment, you looked at it and you said, oh my gosh, how are we going to make it? And usually you realize within a year that you had more money now than you had before. And it's the same way. It's that thing that you step into it and plan, right? You know what you want to do. You know that you've got yourself covered, and enjoy it.
Yeah. So it was a 2-year time frame the first time. I imagine there was some pent up adventuring that you wanted to do, right? Yeah. One of my fears, frankly, is you hear about the day you start dying, the day that you stop growing, right? And whether that's learning something new or just trying something different. Have you started thinking about what that's going to be when you transition to that next path? Is there something you want to learn? Is there a hobby you want to take up? Good question.
I've tried so many hobbies as I grew along the way. So I dabbled in playing guitar. Plus I have my snowmobiling thing. So I'll do more of that, trying to learn a foreign language, those kinds of things. So I would tell anybody, that has that kind of a concern is don't be worried about that. Let it come. And it's interesting, everybody that retires, you hear this all the time, I'm sure, that as you talk to people that you used to work with that are retired, and what do they all tell you? Number one, they all have this smile on their face you can't slap off. And the other one is I don't know how I had time to work.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not out ahead of time planning and thinking. It's reactive after the fact, saying, gosh, I don't have time to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because we talk about that internally all the time. Like our clients and families that we work with that are already retired, they all say the same thing. I'm busier now than I was when I worked. And I don't know how, whether it's you're now a full-time caretaker for your grandkids, because now all of a sudden your kids are like, oh yeah, mom and dad have a lot more free time now, or some of the other hobbies, or people like, so my wife recently stepped away and is now at home, and she's not retired necessarily by traditional definitions, but man, she gets requests all the time because everybody knows she's home now. So she's busy, always busy.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have to have some goals too. What do you want? Do you want a vacation home someplace? Do you want to figure out, do you want to spend a month down south where it's warm in the winter? Do you like to play golf? I like to play golf. I just wish I was good at
it. You know what? The best part about being bad at golf is you get your money's worth. The guy that swings 15 less times and you paid the same greens fees and you got 15 less swings.
Oh, so very wise.
It's your cost per stroke goes way down.
Exactly. And I get to play in the water. I get to play in the sand. And if you're really good, you just get to play on the green. That's not even that fun.
I have a bit of a selfish question. So here you are. You're in the driver's seat right now, right?
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're making the decision on what your next step is.
Mhm.
I'm sure that there's other people that are going to have some influence and want you to do one thing or another. If you were to think back to when I'm 41, Brad's 40. So
Mhm.
when you were at that point in life, if you were to sit down with your 40-and-a-half-year-old self, we'll split the difference. What advice would you give that, Kelly?
Great question. I think because I remember exactly when I was that age, the main thing that I thought about, so I'll just use myself as the example, was that financial security, is trying to understand, where was that line, and where were you going to hit a point? So it really was thinking about retirement. That's the most important thing that I would tell you, is that suddenly at about 40 is when it hits you that you say, oh my gosh, someday I'm going to have to retire. Oh, do I have enough? When would that be? Am I going to be in a position that I have to work a long time? So that's when you really do your research. You spend a little bit of time, and it's not that much, and it's not too late. Even if you're in a position that you don't like at that point, you got plenty of time to recover.
I think that I bet my guess is for the average male, that's about the time we start to think about it, because our mortality really kicks in, right? Because up until about 40, you feel like Superman,
right? Suddenly,
like I'm never going to die. My body works every time I want it to work. When I run. Like, and all of a sudden everything starts to hurt. Sleeping becomes a little harder.
It's also how many muscles you have. You didn't know how many you have until they hurt. You think, I have a lot of muscles. They're not that big, but I have a lot of them.
There's a lot of them in there. It's also the age where it starts to sink in that I feel like up to the age of 40 or the late 30s, you can kind of slough off all the advice that you hear that's really good advice. Mm-hmm. You hear over and over again, you say, that's not going to be me. And then suddenly it sinks in. It's like, it's you. It's going to be you. It already is.
You're so right.
Before we get to kind of the ending wrap of your story here, Kelly, is there anything about your story that we haven't asked that you would like the listeners to know, or just anything, because again, our goal in having you on is just so people can hear a different path, right? It's not the quote unquote normal path to retire and in a couple of years go back to work and then be able to kind of phase yourself out to Matt's point, kind of be in the driver's seat. And, that speaks volumes of who you are and what you did in your career, that you have the opportunity that you did, or that you do right now, right? Because if you didn't have the reputation and do what you did, they wouldn't be calling you, asking you to come back. And so that's impressive in and of itself. But is there just anything else that stands out to you that you think is important for the listeners to hear?
I think, sure. And one of the things I would say is, your past shapes your future. And the main thing is for people, because I hate when somebody looks at me and said, okay, you've had all the breaks and you've done these things and I made choices. We, my wife and I made choices over the years to move to different parts of the country, uproot our family, kids, and do that. Not everybody wants to do that. Yep. And then how do you measure success is what it comes down to. Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough to, make more money maybe than some other people have and those kinds of things. But success is measured by you, not by somebody else. And if you can, that's probably the advice at 40-ish to know, right? You need to understand where you want to go. Don't worry about what somebody else thinks you need to be doing, or if you have as much as somebody else has, or they have the bigger house or whatever. And once you get comfortable with that, it gets pretty easy. It's really gratifying.
Yeah. I love that too. Kelly, we're gonna move into kind of the end here. And what we like to do when we have guests on is just do 5 fast questions, 5 seat type questions. They are questions that Matt and I don't think of ahead of time. They're just whatever question comes to top of mind. And it's just a kind of a fun way to end the episode. So with that said, I'm going to let Matt go first. I'm going to put him on the spot.
All right. I love it. What's the main highway through Green Bay?
Okay.
So that's not the question.
Okay, good. Interstate 41 comes from south from Milwaukee, goes straight. I-43 runs into it. So the two of them come together, and then Interstate 41 continues on. And then Highway 29, which isn't an interstate, Highway 29 goes from Green Bay to Minneapolis.
Okay. So if we were to tell you right now, we're going to we're going to put up a billboard at the intersection of those two interstates, and you get one sentence that we get to put on that billboard. You've given a lot of great advice. I want you to boil it down to one sentence.
Okay. So now, wow, that's putting me on the spot. Are you ready for your future? Are you happy with that?
Awesome. Love it.
That's good. Maybe you should just go do it. Maybe you should just put that billboard up.
You should put your face right next to it too.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to do it so I can get on YouTube or something where I get a bunch of followers and make money doing it.
That's going to be the next. That's going to be the next phase.
Yeah.
Right. Could very well.
I know you mentioned. I know you mentioned earlier one of your favorite vacations was this Eastern European vacation. But if you were going to go on vacation, not just with your wife, but also with your kids and grandkids, where's the one place that as a family you would like to go?
Last spring, we went to Riviera Maya in Mexico. And for the young kids, perfect place to go. And it still had a little bit of the COVID lingering on. So you were in the all-inclusive, that type of thing. Plus, you go to the Mayan ruins and that type of thing for the children that really still had an interest in what's cool here. That worked out really well. Great place.
What is the number one most impactful book that you've ever read?
Good to Great.
Love it.
Yes.
Not Dan Sullivan. Jim Collins.
Yep. Jim Collins. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flywheel.
You threw me out.
And there's another one that goes almost not hand in hand with, but actually changed the way I managed and did work. And that was called Leading Change by, I think it's James Cotter.
Yeah, I've not read that one.
I've not read that one.
It's a
was it Leading book. Change? Leading
Change. And you could read the book and it talks about the steps to a successful change. And even you can do it in your personal life as well. But it really works for business related type things. And you could think, as you read the book, you could think about all the times you failed and what steps you missed. And you could see when things went right, that you got it all right. So then it helped you think about how do I structure and actually do that.
Love it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Huh. We'll have to find that book. We'll try to put it in the show notes if we can remember to do that. If you could have, obviously, had a very successful career, but if you had to go back into the workforce again and you're a younger person again and money was no object, what career path would you choose?
Okay, I would have been a surgeon, hands down.
Oh, really?
Surgeon. Wow. That was fast. That was a very fast response.
All right, exactly. But when I went to college, my favorite subject was sociology. But I still think I'd be a doctor where you could be, do something really good, like save somebody's life. Yep. And the other part of that is, maybe invent something with the knowledge that you have as well.
Awesome.
Nice.
Last question. So far, you're 4 for 4. You did it.
Last question. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. So your last meal, what is your last meal? You can choose the beverage and the food.
Okay. My last meal was Mexican because, I should have taken it. This breakfast. I had breakfast. I had fruit and yogurt. And,
no. This is going to be your last meal ever.
Like, what would you choose as your last meal?
Okay. My last meal. That Mexican. I would have.
It was a good day.
Yeah, it's my favorite food. Whether it's an enchilada or a fajita or a chimichanga or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's
from any specific restaurant you would choose it from?
Yes, absolutely. The very best Mexican I've ever had is right in Green Bay. It's called Margaritas.
Nice.
And it's not a chain restaurant. It's right near the stadium, and the food is fantastic.
Wow. So, what is your drink with your Mexican food?
Regular margarita on the rocks.
Nice.
Yeah, we can still be friends. I'm a Mexican. I'm a Mexican food guy too.
If you would have said a frozen margarita,
right. No, that's where I'm at too. No thanks. No, it's got to be on the rocks. We just talked about it last night, and a brother-in-law's birthday. We had gone for a different place, and I said, no, you got to drink it on the rocks.
Yeah. 100%. The best part about Mexican food is it's all the same ingredients. It's just how do you want it packaged.
Right. It's also, I feel like you try to go to an upscale Mexican restaurant, it's not as good as just the basic stuff.
No.
That's part.
Absolutely. I living in Atlanta and right downtown, they had some really, really fancy Mexican restaurants. And you were like, this isn't good.
Give me the street taco. Give me the street taco.
Give me the street taco. Yes, exactly. Bring me the truck.
I like deconstructed tacos, also known as nachos.
Yes.
Because that's what they are. Kelly, thanks so much for being on Every Day is Saturday. It was a joy to hear your story in the first place. And I heard a bunch of it today that I didn't get to hear the first time. And so genuinely appreciate you taking the time to be here, even though we sent you the wrong Zoom link and all the other things. So thanks for sticking with us and getting on.
It was probably my operator there as well. So no worries. It's great.
And I just got to tell you, in listening to your story, there's a lot of things that kind of stand out. But one of the things that just, nothing that you said specifically, but just in the way you carry yourself and the way that you talk. And I just know that you must have been a joy to work for. And the people that work for you must love working for you. The way that you carry yourself is just quite impressive. And so kudos to you for finding the success that you've found. And I know you made comments about how you've had some luck along the way, and we all do. But at the end of the day, you've obviously made a lot of decisions that define your path, and you deserve absolutely to be where you're at. And so again, thanks for sharing some of your story. Hopefully some of the listeners out there got to learn something today that will impact the way that they make their decisions moving forward. Yeah, just genuinely appreciate it, Kelly. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Everyone watch out for that.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing
it. Look out for that billboard. Brought to you by Margaritas in Green Bay.
Brought to you by Margaritas, right? And please follow this link, right?
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Every Day is Saturday. Again, my name is Brad Gatto. This is my partner, Matt Stahl. If this is the first ever episode of our podcast you've listened to and you've not yet subscribed, we would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the podcast. You can do that in the show notes. You can also just do that on any platform where you find your podcast. Search for Every Day is Saturday and go and subscribe there. If you want to know more about our firm at Fiat, you can find everything you need to know about Fiat on fiatwm.com, FIATWM.com. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and we will see you next Saturday.
Thank you for listening to Every Day is Saturday. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Fiat Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.